Thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant.
Hey everyone, Jeff here, and just want to welcome everyone to Get to Know Me podcast, where I get to visit with our trans and our non-binary family from hopefully all over the world. And joining me today is I got Markosias here. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing really good and enjoying the last warmth before we have another cold front come through.
That's very true. That's very true.
So I'm just going to dig right into it, get started and everything. Want to learn as much as we can about you in this short period of time that we've got.
Oh yeah.
So has being trans been an obstacle in your life when it comes to, I call it the threes, your friends, your family, and work?
So it no longer is. When I first started as an EMT in Tampa, it was an issue. I dealt with a lot of bigotry, especially as an EMT first responder. I'm sure a lot of people know that it's a very like military mentality.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I didn't have any issues, but of course, there was a couple of them that would just say the nastiest things to me. I ended up having to quit my EMT job because I was getting in trouble for calling out the bigots.
Hmm.
Um, One of those things. I ended up leaving. I worked for a psych ward for a while. I didn't really have any issues there. And ultimately now I work as an ER nurse and I don't face any issues now, but I think it's more because at the time that I was facing a lot of like the problems as an EMT, it was because I was new to being trans. I hadn't been trans for a very long time. I had just started HRT, so there was a lot of it also came from a lot of difficulties that the word trans was not as well known when I
Hmm.
was an EMT, and it wasn't well known when I was in high school either. I mean, you were lucky if you were on, you had internet, and then you were lucky if you even found that word or even someone who existed under that,
Yeah.
term. So it took me a very long time, but in the beginning it was rough. It was really, really rough trying to make friends and trying to navigate in the queer and trans community. And obviously now I have a wonderful time. I have a lot of friends, and I'm very open. Even at work, I'm very open about being trans. Just because I live in a very red area, and by that I mean I live in an area that is very anti-trans,
Hmm.
anti-queer. Um, so it's a little difficult, in so many of my cases, I am actually the first and only trans person a lot of people in my area have ever met. And the repeating statement I always get is, oh, well, you're not what they say you're supposed to be like on media. They're like on the news, they're actually portrayed this way, or they say these things, or I still get the identify as an Apache helicopter joke. And I laugh because it's so stupid. I thought that was left in the 2000s, and I'm still
Hmm.
getting it. Even from patients, sometimes I'll have patients say weird transphobe jokes to me, and I'll look at them and I'll be like, do they know, or are they just being trying to like be funny? You never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but that's it. It's a wild little time.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do. If you just get to know us,
Yeah.
you'll find out we're just like any other person trying to live their life.
It really is that. I mean, like, my coworkers, a lot of them will come up to me and be like, I've had them pull me aside and be like, I didn't know. Have I ever said anything offensive to you? And I was like, you didn't, because you didn't know. And, I was also like, the fact that you just thought I was just a human being, a coworker, a nurse existing, it never came to you to be any other way. And I was like, that's how it should be. It's like, it
Yeah.
shouldn't matter if you know I'm trans or not. I'm a regular human. I'm still working. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's
Right.
crazy to me.
Yeah, and that's what I just don't understand how people do what they do, but
Oh yeah,
it's the world we live in.
that's yeah. I'll tell you what. I mean, it's always funny to me because I have a lot of Republican friends, and a lot of them have had to change their mentalities, being like, oh well, this is you're just different than I ever imagined. But of course I've had friends who are like, well, you're the exception. You're the exception. And you're like, okay, not how that works, but if
Exactly.
that'll make you happy,
Yeah,
like
that's what makes you happy.
I'm like, just wait till you meet the second one, and then you'll start realizing maybe it's not the exception kind of thing.
That's
But
right. That's right. So what pronouns do you go by?
I go by he, him. I do have a lot of people say they, them. I don't really mind it, but I know that there are a lot of trans men who do get very dysphoric when they're called they them because it's seen as like not validating their actual pronouns. I personally I get it they them, and obviously in the kink community I get pup and stuff, and those are just all things that I respond to. But
Yeah.
the only thing I've ever been adamant and I still deal with at work, but I get she heard a lot. I don't get mad about it. It's work. But outside of it, if someone is like purposely doing it, I mean, I'm gonna call them out. I'll be like,
Oh, of
hey,
course. Yeah.
you're doing that on purpose, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like that you missed out on anything during your childhood, providing that I'm guessing you transitioned at a later time?
I did. So I thought when I was a teenager, I never, not even but as a kid, I never thought that I was a girl. It never really hit me. Puberty was an awful time. We had like training bras. I
Yeah.
refused to wear them for the longest time. I was like, why do I need this? It's tight. It's uncomfortable. I mean, and then obviously puberty hits and you're just like, this is awful. This doesn't match. At the time, I always dressed pretty boyish. We always
Hmm.
just said, "Oh, I'm just a little bit of a tomboy," stuff like that. Um, and it was rough. I didn't get to do a lot of the stuff that if I had known early in life I would have done. I always, when I first started transitioning, I thought about it. I said, if I was a kid again, I probably would have been part of like sports teams. I probably would have, done a lot more. Probably would have felt a lot more comfortable in my body, not been so. I mean, I wouldn't even talk. I was a really shy kid. I didn't want to speak to anyone. My mom signed me up for a summer camp drama, acting school just to get me to like talk more. And, even that, it was just because I was so uncomfortable with my body, so uncomfortable with my name. I went by my middle name for a long time because I was like, oh, like, the first one's it's just too girly for me. It never occurred to me until probably high school when I heard, the word trans for the first time. And I said, wait a minute, that sounds kind of interesting. But I was like, but there's no way. And it's funny too. It's a running joke between me and my friends who I've had for years. I actually, I was in college, I joined a sorority, and I mean like the full makeup, hair,
Oh.
holding the like in the movies, everything you imagine. But I was in that. I fell so back into the closet because I said, oh, I just got to. Maybe it's me. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's a running joke because I was in a sorority. I did makeup, I did hair, I did like the dresses. We had the big extravagant sorority events and all that. And some of my old sorority sisters, because they added me to their alumni group, and I always laugh because I'm like, I'm the only guy in this sorority group. Someone's bound to ask a question. They're like, "Oh, will you're free to come to our events as alumni." I was like, there might be some questions asked around as to why a man is showing up to these sorority events.
Oh.
But yeah, I definitely it hit harder in college because I wanted so bad to be a frat boy. My best friends were in frats. I actually spent more time in a frat house than I ever did in my sorority house. I went to all the frat parties. All my friends were frat brothers, and I think they knew
Hmm.
better than I did because when I came out later, they were like, "Yeah, we figured that."
Wow. Wow. What a story.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, what has been your favorite part of your transition?
So honestly, my favorite part is just how much more comfortable I've been as myself. I mean, I'll say it to anyone. I hate doing my HRT shot. I mean, you get shot anxiety, and my surgery was it wasn't as rough as it could be, but my top surgery was rough. I had to go to Michigan for it, but despite it all, I've actually been able to succeed more in life now and feel I used to be very suicidal as a kid. And I mean as a kid I was growing up and through college it was, the absolute worst. I every day I just said, you know, we'll see if I make it to 16. We'll see if I make it to
Mm.
18. We'll see if I might make it to 21. And it just kept going until a point where I was like, well, I'm going to do it at 25. Like, that's it. It's not getting better, kind of thing. And, once I started HRT, once I started having top surgery, I was like, wait a minute, I can actually be happy in this life. I can identify as I want. And that's ultimately what did it. I said, because what am I going to go back to? Being suicidal and wanting to die all the time? Or now I face, of course I get bigots and I get, comments, but I'm like, they're not affecting me. They weren't there, they weren't supporting me when I wasn't trans. So why
Yeah,
would I be bothered by them now that I'm happy? You know what I mean?
yeah.
And,
Now,
that's it.
do you do your own shots, or do you go somewhere and have to get them?
I do my own. When I first started, I luckily was I already had first responder and EMT stuff, so I mean I was used to doing all my medications, so I do my own shots. Luckily, you just have to get over that shot anxiety because sticking yourself with an insulin needle that's this big versus an intramuscular needle which is more like
Um,
that big. It's
yeah,
a little bit more daunting.
yeah, of course. And see that's again something that I've learned because it came up on another one of my podcasts about that they go and have the shots. They used to do them themselves, but now someone does them for them.
Oh yeah.
And something that again I'm learning. So,
Yeah, I have a lot of friends and even then they now have come out with like it's like a testosterone gel that you can do so you just
mhm.
pump it and you wipe it. They've come up with, all kinds of different stuff and it's amazing. I mean, the unfortunately the gel is so much more expensive and a little bit less effective than the IM shots.
Uh-huh.
So it's really up to the person and up to like insurance and, the difficulties of that. But
Oh, sure.
slowly they're coming up with more ways that are just so much easier and so much less like anxiety inducing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, good. Well, what worries you the most about being trans in this crazy world?
So unfortunately there's a lot of problems I face, especially here in Florida. There is the bathroom ban.
Yeah.
So one of my, worst fears is I don't go to straight bars anymore because there's always that fear that someone's going to call the cops. And on my license, it still says female. So I have unfortunately had friends who've been arrested. They've been sent to, a female jail despite the fact that they're trans. And it's that thing where you can get in so much trouble just for, going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And not even that. I mean, there's been so many cases of trans men purposely being killed for being trans. I
Mhm.
educate a lot of people on the fact that there is something called trans panic, which is a defense that some people use after murdering a trans person by saying that they didn't know they were trans. They found out after meeting up with them, and then, they killed them out of shock or whatever.
Yeah.
And not even that is the experience that I've had, even as, someone who I used to use Grinder before I, realized I was aro ace. I just thought sex was awful at the time, and I thought all sex was bad. And I'm like, oh, maybe it's me actually, and that's a whole different journey. But on Grinder, I mean, it was just an awful, awful time. People would just say the nastiest things to you. Or they would just fetishize you. They would, basically reduce you down to your
Mhm.
sexual organs. I had an old friend who had also said something to me basically because I was a lot more people came forward with me being like if they liked me or whatever, and he had basically summed it up to being like that I was not a real man and he didn't understand why men were more interested in me than him because he had the right parts and I didn't.
Oh,
And yeah, things like that. I've dealt with a lot. I've had people outwardly tell me, despite the fact that I've never said anything to them, they'll be like, "Oh, well, I just could never be with a trans man." And one of these moments, I was like, "Well, I wasn't interested in you in that way anyway, but now I don't even want a friendship with you."
yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, and it's just a problem. And now I can't change my gender identity in Florida anymore. That is banned. We can't change our license. And in many ways, I had a really good friend of mine who got rejected to change his name. He was in Tampa, and
Mm.
the judge refused, denied his claim or his paperwork. Luckily, he had a different friend in a different county that was friends with a different judge, and he was able to get it done. But
Good.
it's just, things like that are just awful. And even then, it's not to go on, but even trans people in the kink community, trans people in gay spaces. I mean, one bar that I've been to, they did what they called was a chest check,
Hmm.
basically to make sure you had to lift your shirt and show that you did not have breasts, in order to enter certain parts of the bar. So I had top surgery, and this was the problem, was that bar, that was the only place you could go to the lockers. So
Hmm.
you had to show your chest just to use the lockers.
Wow.
And I obviously I was okay. I had my top surgery, but there was another trans man there who was pre-top surgery, and just the devastation on his face. I had told him, I was like, listen, I know we're strangers, we've never met, but if you want me to put yourself in a locker, I'm gonna be here all night. Obviously, like you don't have to trust me. I'm a complete stranger, but I was like, we have to look out for each other, and
Yeah.
it's just messed up. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I agree. It is messed up.
Yeah.
The
Well,
thing,
and that's no, go ahead. I'm
no,
sorry.
I just say the things that I learned that you have to deal with is just awful.
Well, and it's, not leaning, I'm leaning heavy into the pup community too, because when I first started as a pup, it was just intimidating. I was at a campground, and I had worn my binder, my chest binder, and it was terrifying. I mean, people were just staring, and again, being trans, I was new to the queer community too.
Yeah.
Um, and it was terrifying. I mean, people just, you can't even go anywhere without people just staring at you and just giving you these looks. No one would say a word to me. And that was my first experience in the pub community and the critter community too, was, I felt so alone, because I was like, I thought, being in the pub community at the very least, I was like, I saw online there were, trans pups and stuff. And now I feel like I'm invading, I'm in the wrong place. Um, but luckily now it's gotten so much better down here in Florida, where, there's other trans people in the
Yes.
community, and
Yes.
people have gone out of their way to be like, hey, like, how can I help you? What can I do to make you more comfortable? And that's actually become a wonderful thing down here, is that the critter community has become a lot more welcoming than it was when I first entered.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. So what has surprised you the most in your transition?
Probably the most surprising was the most surprising was the top surgery aspect. Just the difference that people feel when they have like surgery, and my difference was like, even coming out to people and everything was difficult.
Hmm.
People didn't fully understand. The most surprising aspect, though, for me was probably just the fact that there was such a harsh difference in people's opinions of me, despite the fact that they'd known me for years. And some of them did not see me as a man until after I had my top surgery, which was weird.
Yeah.
And then so it's difficult, because you'll have friends that you've had for years who suddenly don't want to be your friend anymore because you're trans. And I'm talking about like childhood friends.
Hmm.
You've had friends for, years, who know who you are, know that you're this way, and everything. And then the second that you have facial hair, suddenly they decide that you're an abomination. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At work, I've had people completely change their opinions. I mean, obviously, I'm in a place where that's, that happens, but people will find out that I'm trans because they didn't know beforehand. Suddenly, I'm being treated differently.
Hmm.
So it got it, and this was probably the hardest story that I always tell people in my experience. When I was a first responder, I had someone who was adamant. Every time that we ran a call together, she would purposefully ask me for my legal name in front of the patient. And obviously, you can't do that. Like,
Right.
patients, we have everyone in the community as a patient. It doesn't matter, what you are. And so finally, my paramedic at the time, he was my partner, we'd been working together for a while. He finally goes, he's like, you should just say something. So she does it again in front of this patient. She goes, what's your first name in our system? Because we have documentation. I was like, I was like, and in front of the patient, this patient's sitting on her stretcher in the back of the ambulance. And I finally go, have you just been waiting for me to just say I'm trans? Like, is that what you've been waiting for? Because I was like, because I had said it to everyone in the truck. We have, firefighters and everyone. And I look at the patient. I was like, does it bother you that I'm trans? And the patient, who's there for a 911 call, by the way,
Right.
this shouldn't be a thing. And he goes, I don't care if you're trans. He's like, you put my leg back together. I don't care what you are. And I
Yeah.
said, oh, so you're not bothered that I'm trans? And I was like, so I looked at my partner. I said, are you bothered that I'm trans? And he's like, we've worked together for months. I don't care. And so I finally look at this lady and I was like, so everyone else doesn't seem to be bothered by the fact that I look a little different, but you seem to have a problem with me. I was like, do you want me to get HR involved? I mean, we can do that if you have such a problem working with a trans person. And needless to say, she never spoke to me again.
Wow.
Every time we ran a call together and she was there, she saw me walk out of that truck and she would go stay in her fire truck and everything. And obviously I was at that place where I was like, I don't want to do an HR scandal. I don't want to deal with all this.
Right.
I'm just trying to save lives. You know what I mean? Like,
That's right. Yeah.
my job has always been medical, and my patients have never cared that I was trans. Not that I've ever outwardly told them, but
Right.
yeah, at the end of the day, it's like they only care that they're not bleeding anymore and they feel better, and then
That's
they're
right.
not dying.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's what I always, I have always told people, I'm like, listen, I've had people have problems with me, and at moments I will just outwardly be like, I will out myself, and I don't mind it. Because again, I treat my patients. I'm like, listen, if you have a problem with me being trans after I've given you morphine, after I've given you steroids, after I've stopped your bleeding, after I've, fixed all your problems, and now you have a problem with me, I'm like, you should have had a problem the second I walked into the room.
Yeah.
Because then, like, you could have asked for a different nurse, and I can promise you, if that had come to the charge nurse, you'd probably be dealing with a bigger problem than just a trans nurse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's
So what can
difficult.
an outsider like me do to make it better for the
So I have I've had the wonderful opportunity of having my pack is I do have a cis man, and then I have two cis pack mates, and then I have a non-binary and well, two non-binary pack mates. And the biggest thing ever is just correct. If people use the wrong pronouns, be like, hey, it's this. Because obviously I've had people misgender other of my friends, and I'll be like, so
hmm
they'll be like she, and I'll say he. I do it with my patients. I've had trans patients and I've had coworkers purposely misgender, and I will correct them every single time
Okay.
that they. So that's a big thing. And two, just if you see a trans person just by themselves at an event, just go up to them, because it's horrifying enough being trans, and it's horrifying enough being a trans in a new environment where you feel
hmm
like you're an outsider. Because, like I said, when I was first coming out as a pup and everything, I felt like an outsider. No one would talk to me, and it felt like especially being a gay trans man was just daunting, absolutely daunting. And going to those spaces. And now if I see non-binary or trans people or queer people, I will go out of my way, because believe it or not, it's not surprising. Every single time I go to an event and there is a queer person that's new or a trans person that's new, you will always find them in the corner with a drink in their hand, not speaking to anyone because they're terrified.
They're terrified. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Well, I'll definitely do my part. So,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It makes a world of a difference, and it's correcting pronoun, because you will find pretty quickly that some of your friends are transphobes just by the fact that how they address certain people. And for me, I cut them out. I'm like, hey, listen, if you refuse to say the right pronouns to that person, if you refuse to admit that they're a human being and more than just the word trans, you know what I mean, it's you don't have a spot in my life, kind of
oh,
thing.
I don't blame you. So,
Yeah.
any last words?
No, I mean, for me, being trans has been like a wonderful journey, and it's a hard journey. We have so many things that are against us, and in the news, we've had so many trans people die recently. One of the most famous, I don't know if you've heard of him, but his name's Apollo Moon.
I
He
saw.
actually just passed, and that was devastating. I mean, you have trans men in the community who are such role models, and seeing, the individuals pass either by assault or medical issues or anything, it's scary for us. But the thing that we do is just show up, be yourself, because honestly, I mean, there are trans kids that are looking up and seeing us trans adults as a way of showing, like, wait, I can actually grow up as a trans person.
Yeah.
I can grow up as a trans man. I can grow up as a trans woman. I belong in kink spaces. I belong in punk spaces. I can actually exist as myself in this world. And that there is no greater gift you can give to someone than saying you belong here.
Hmm. Well, I couldn't say it any better. Just always know you have an ally here with me and Smokey because
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you two are fantastic. I mean, you guys have always been wonderful. So, I mean, I tell any trans person, any new pups, because I get a lot of them on Instagram. I'll say, hey, listen, like, check out, come to our Orlando events, come to these events and see that we are very diverse. We're very queer. And you know what? We're always accepting new people.
that's right. We'll welcome anybody in with open arms. So,
Oh, 100%.
well, I just want to say thank you for be wanting to be a part of this. It's an awesome journey for not only me, but I'm sure for everyone else that takes part in it and stuff. And I'm looking forward to all the learning I'm going to get out of it
Oh,
because
yeah.
I definitely need to learn. So,
And it's great. I mean, when you reached out to me about this, I thought that was one of the best things that the world needs right now. I have trans friends all over the world. I have some in London. I have some in Italy. I had, a couple of friends outside of in Canada and stuff. And we all have our own stories, but we all have like that same kind of like feeling of like, oh, like I just need to find a place I belong.
yeah.
And being able to like tell our stories and say, hey, we're all completely different. We're all going through it right
Hmm.
now.
Definitely.
And, having someone listen to be able to tell it, I mean, that's the best thing. And I 100% was so happy when you told me that you were creating this. I was like, this is it. This is finally something that we like, finally people can hear us and realize we're human beings. We're
That's
not,
right. And that
we're not.
that's the reason I wanted to do it, is to realize that they're just everyday people like us wanting to live their life.
I'm like, listen, I'm just an ER nurse. That's, I just live my life that way. I'm like, I'm not trying to do anything crazy. I'm just trying to save lives on a daily basis, man. You know what I mean?
I know. Well, thank you again, and I know I'll probably be seeing you out soon.
Oh, 100%. Thank you so much.
Bye. It is so important of trans individuals to have control over their narratives and their lives. A reminder that each person's journey is unique and valid, regardless of where they are on their path. Please take care of everyone.